If we learned anything from 2020 and on, it was that the supply chain is extremely fragile. And so I was bringing out these videos discussing this and showing you all the little points, but it's important to note what we see today is actually not any better than it was back then. And so right now, there's this article that I want to show you and connect that in with a few points about China and Russia's stranglehold on the food supply. I'm going to show you what's happening with commodities. It is extremely important because you as an individual, you need to do what you can today because it looks like our governments are simply not going to deal with it. They're not going to deal with that. They're going to posture up, they're going to bow up, they're going to say, China can't do this, China can't do that. But at the same time, you've got these big concerns. Look at what's going on. Look who's buying all the farmland. You've got individuals like Bill Gates buying up all the farmland. You've got China buying farmland that is a concern for many people. You have big corporations, agribusinesses, and yet more and more people today are stepping away from that, not growing their own food. And that, of course, presents itself with extreme dangers. We have literally 3 days before the store shelves are empty, and yet people, every time, they might live in an area that's prone to hurricanes or tornadoes and everything, and it's the same cycle every time. They are not prepared. People are not prepared. I'm going to bring you the information. Let's start right here. Russia and China have a stranglehold on the world's food security. Moscow's invasion of Ukraine highlighted the role of fertilizers and who controls them as a strategic lever of global influence. During this period of time, 2020, we saw that while Russia, Ukraine, the situation was happening, the battles are raging on, fertilizer prices started shooting through the roof. And then what happened beyond that? You looked at all the different grains that were being exported from these two countries. Suddenly you couldn't get it. Countries like Iran that were pulling that from Ukraine suddenly couldn't. So bread prices were going crazy. A staple, something very simple that would normally be cheap. Well, now what happens if you don't have a supply anymore? The price goes through the roof. These things are happening right now today. It's not a future event. All right, here we go. The cargo, trapped for months at the Dutch port of Rotterdam, was so precious that the United Nations intervened to mediate its release. The World Food Programme chartered a ship to transport it to Mozambique, from where it was being taken by truck through the interior to its end destination, Malawi. And then let me break that down further. If you look right here, it's not grain or maize, but 20,000 metric tons of Russian fertilizer, and it can't come soon enough. About 20% of Malawi's population is projected to face acute food insecurity during the lean season through March, making the use of fertilizers to grow crops all the more vital. It's one of the 48 nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America identified by the IMF as at most risk to the shock to food and fertilizer costs. And it goes on. Basically, this is not something that will be changed overnight. You're going to see that. This is just one example. It's from Belarus in the picture that they're showing right here. And for a lot of countries, we take this for granted that the crops can come in or that the growth can happen. But it's not the way it's always been. Things have, look, it's not just one crop. Like, you just look all over the place. Our food supply is reliant, generally, on other countries, whether it's because of the crop where it's grown itself or whether it's the fertilizer. Very, very dangerous. And then also you look at the crops, the GMO crops that require all that nasty stuff they put on top of it. That's the way it works now. That's the business. They built a business around our food supply, and that is a big concern. I don't need to tell you that. Yet, alongside humanitarian considerations, it's the realization that much of the world relies on just a few nations for most of its fertilizers, notably Russia, its ally Belarus, and China. That's ringing alarm bells in global capitals, just as semiconductors have become a lightning rod for geopolitical friction, so the race for fertilizers has alerted the US and its allies to strategic dependency for agricultural input that is a key determinant for food security. Now, I shouldn't need to say this, but this is the way that things are grown today. This is not how it should be. You shouldn't need these type of fertilizers, but the land that they're growing on is completely barren. It's like sand. It's like trying to grow in the desert. And then they just dump all these, they basically plant the crops, they dump all of these fertilizers on top, and then we get that food that is completely devoid of any nutrients. That's what we're getting. But that's the way that it works, okay? So I'm just letting you know this at a time in which there is more concern. Geopolitical tensions are rising, and we have to be aware of it. We can't just forget it. It doesn't, not something I care about. You have to be caring about this. This is essential. This is integral to your own security. Forget about, if you want to look at it a nation or city or whatever. It's you. It's you, really. Fertilizer giants, China maintains a big lead in the nitrogen and phosphate production. There's, China on the top of the list. Next, Russia, India, USA, Canada. All right. Here we have China taking control of LNG as global demand booms. World will be reliant on nation to resell cargoes in 2023. Some 15% of new long-term LNG contracts were signed by China. China went out there and said, what can we buy? We need to buy all of this right now. At a time in which Europe needs more liquid natural gas, they need that gas coming in. This is going on. So you have to understand this is strategic on the part of China. That also means that they have demand. They probably want it. It's not just a business transaction. And that means they believe there could be more growth. You could speculate on why they're doing it, but it is important because this natural gas is so key to keeping prices down, which, let me just flip to that really quickly. You're looking at natural gas prices. They've come down a lot. Okay, we're back to those levels of 2020, which is very good. We want to see that. But businesses seem to still be paying way too much. A rush by China to sign a new long-term liquefied natural gas deal promises to give the nation even more control of the global market at a time when competition for cargoes is booming. Chinese companies are selling the most LNG purchase agreements of any nation and increasingly are becoming the sector's key import intermediary. The Chinese buyers are reselling many of the cargoes to the highest bidders in Europe and Asia, effectively taking charge over a hefty chunk of supply. You see what's happening right here? China is doing this with the food supply. Russia, these countries here, they have access to these things that we need, and they're taking advantage of it. That's what business is all about. They're taking advantage. And what do? Well, you could say, China, you're bad. We're going to put tariffs on you. We're going to do this. Or you can actually incentivize your own country to do this, because where are you right now? Let's say you're in the US. Let's say you're in Canada, Australia. Every country is probably so rich in resources, some more than others. But what do? We say, we're going to outsource it. These are very dangerous things when we do it so much. It's not wise. It really isn't. And we're learning that today. At least you and I are learning it if we're watching this video. What I want to show you right here is talking about China and their consumption of commodities. And this just basically gets into the fact that as they sold, possibly to re-enter when demand was better, others bought the dips as the market went down, defiant that the situation in crude will soon sort itself out, thanks to one magic word, China. Since Beijing announced at the start of the year they're going away with all the lockdowns and stuff, the long oil world has been salivating of what that could mean for the demand in the largest importer of the commodity. This is important because it just shows us how much demand there really is, what China wants to do that can in fact push the price up significantly of oil. So I would watch this as well. Take a look at what's happening with oil, and as a fact that it is always in high demand, but then when you get certain things happening, like in the case of a reopening in China, that puts a lot of extra demand there. We don't know what will happen long term, but here we are. China's Baowu seeks deeper ties with Rio Tinto on iron ore trade. So this is one company. We're looking at the world's biggest steel maker. They want close ties with iron ore miner Rio Tinto as China demands for the raw material rebound. So China is going to Australia saying, hey, let's put our differences aside for just a minute here. We need more of that iron ore. We want more of this commodity. We want to grow, we want to build, we want to expand, and we're going to do some deals. This is, of course, very good for Australia. It looks like it's going to be on the western side of Australia where they're doing this. A lot of money being spent. Good for Australia in the sense. And the way I look at it is when you are doing deals with another country, that increases the economic alliance, and of course that helps. that does help keep everything cool and calm. And we don't know what's going to happen between the two countries because, Australia is obviously very, very friendly with the United States. But here they are, they're positioned geographically so close to each other, they're always doing deals. And this alliance, I'm interested to see where that goes. Does Australia start to pivot towards China more? And do they back away from the US? Remains to be seen. Here we have it. US-China tensions showed no signs of cooling over the weekend due to the issues surrounding the Chinese spy balloon, potential aid. That's the one I want to touch on. The potential aid to Russia. So China is basically going in and saying, hey, look, you're sending tanks, you're sending all these weapons, you're sending multi-billion dollars over there to Ukraine. We want to send it to our friends in Russia. We want to help out. I'm interested to see what happens. Very, very worrisome on many levels because it's just really just a war that's going on. It's not like Russia and Ukraine's war. This is the whole world. It is really World War III in a sense. This is also showing us what's happening with oil because whenever you have a crisis like this, it certainly will have an impact on the price of oil. China's rebound is the biggest unknown facing oil markets. That's more of the connection there. We got to see what happens. Are they opening up? I'm going to give you some information in the coming weeks as it comes out. All the different numbers. They were, of course, closed down for their new year just recently. That's coming up. We're opening up and now we'll get the new data. So we don't want to take that data from like end of January, early February because the whole country was shut down. We want the next available data after that. If you subscribe to the channel, click that button down below. I will bring that directly to you. I'll give you all the latest and greatest stuff. Let me touch on the next aspect about commodities. Latin America looks to capitalize on soaring lithium demand. Lithium-ion batteries are in everything. I think I probably have one under my skin by now. Who knows? It's all over the place. They probably put one in my brain while I was sleeping. This is what's going on. That demand for that commodity is going to rise. Look for the countries, look for the businesses that are involved in that. It's just like when you look for all these businesses involved in uranium. You know that these countries are going to go ahead with nuclear. They're going to deem this to be green if they haven't already. Why? Because they have to. They have to go in this direction. Look at what Japan did. Opened up. Hey, we want nuclear again. All these other countries are going to have to extend that. So what does that mean? It means uranium is going to be needed on a smaller scale, on a larger scale, regardless. Who gets the benefit from that? It's the uranium companies. There's also different ETFs that are based on actual physical uranium as well. Okay? That's up to you what you want to do with that information, by the way. Companies across the US economy have faced a severe shortage of workers since the onset of 2020 as people left the workforce in record numbers. Employees were quitting all over the place. Millions, literally today, millions of empty jobs still persist here in 2023. And that is connected with this, which says when retirees slide right into the job they have done before, it helps cut back on training time. What is this all about? Well, the people who retired now moving back into that job. People moving back into the workforce. They're retired. They use an example here. This guy's 72 years old. He's moving back in. Now, I think that's fine if people want to work. Shouldn't be forced to work because of economic aspects. Steel makers increase production amidst rising prices and demand. Yet again, iron ore, steel, as it moves into different products, we are noticing this all around. Demand is increasing, which is positive. That is a positive development for the global economy. What does it mean? It means somebody's building. What will happen tomorrow, we don't know though. U.S. plans new Russia export controls, sanctions on key industries. I don't know what else can be sanctioned. I think they've sanctioned the thing top to bottom. But here we go. More sanctions so we could see restrictions where there are restrictions. And by the way, look, I'm not mentioning this just for fun, just because it's in the news. Where there are restrictions, you see higher prices. Higher prices. Maybe that's, let's say, fertilizer. If fertilizer was something that was restricted, well then, higher prices on food. That's just the way it works. That's why I bring this to you, okay? And last but not least, water crisis in the West. Massive reservoir, Lake Powell, hits historic low water level. that's going on. That affects everything. It's going to be worsening of a crisis, at least in the near future. And so you, as a result of this, if you are living in one of these areas that is prone to it, I mean, this is extremely dangerous. You should have your water harvesting in place and, be prepared, more prepared. A lot of people, they're not. Food supply, water supply, electricity, all of these things are investments. When you invest in these things, you are doing yourself a favor, your family a favor, and I think more people should be, but they don't. That's the way it goes. If you want to know the latest and greatest information, it's right here at the Money GPS. Hit that subscribe. So I will see you tomorrow. Take care.